Hi everyone, just wanted to say a quick thank you for joining us for our webinar today. We're going to give everybody else maybe about 3 or 4 more minutes to join, and then we'll go ahead and get started. All right, everyone. Thank you for joining the webinar today. My name is Jessie Shields, and I am going to be the host for today's webinar. I'm with TS Banking Group. So just a few housekeeping items that I wanted to get started with is that everyone on the webinar will be muted during the presentation just so we can get through all of the standards and the resources. So if you do have questions along the way, you can either write them down for the end, we'll do a Q&A, or you can ask the questions in the attendee chat box in the upper left side of your screen, attendee chat. If you send those through, we can kind of answer those throughout the presentation as we go along. And I would like to then introduce Vicki Vermeer, and she will be your presenter for today's webinar, and I will let her take it from here.
Great. Thank you, Jessie. Welcome, everyone. We're glad you're here today. We have a ton of information to get through, and so I'm just going to move right into our presentation. I'll probably talk pretty quickly, but you will get a copy of both the PowerPoint, as Jessie said, and the recording of what I'm saying. And so feel free to go back as often as you need and share it with others as well. So to start with today, we're doing the 4th grade standards, and we're going to start with standard 4.11, describe how scarcity requires a person to make a choice and identify costs associated with that choice. So first of all, students must know what scarcity is, and so we've put a link. All the pictures in the PowerPoint are all linked. There's links in the notes, and they're hyperlinked in the pictures. So you should have no problem accessing the resources that we're talking about here. So there's just a 2-minute little video on the scale, where the little scale is, that defines scarcity and helps students with that. Or if they learn better by music, then the music note there has a little tune about scarcity set to the tune of "O Christmas Tree." So that'll get your students the foundation they need. Then going over to the right, where the Play-Doh balls are, they can playfully practice scarcity. There's about a 9-minute teacher demo there, and then a practical application with Lewis and Clark. Anytime you can tie economics and personal finance standards into other topics or other subjects that you teach, it's a time-saving thing, and it helps students see that these topics are not standalone, that they apply to all of life. And so we've included an example here for Lewis and Clark, tying in scarcity. Of course, on their expedition, they had scarcity of money, they had scarcity of space on the boats that they're using on the rivers, and this lesson will pull out all of those ideas for the students. Then they need to be able to make a decision based on what the scarcity demands of them. The PACE model is a good way to do that, and where it says PACE on the side there, that's a lesson about how to use that type of decision-making process. It's a good one for students. And the lesson about choices, the boy there looking at hamburger and apple, that's a lesson to actually walk the students through a demonstration of PASTE and teach them how to use it based on lunch choices that students may have. Then we have some literature tie-ins for this one. We have Beatrice's goat. The choice to receive a goat has far-reaching impact for her and for her community, and changes the opportunities that Beatrice has. And so that's a good one about choice. Uncle Jed's barber shop also. Uncle Jed must make many choices throughout his lifetime, and each of those choices comes with a cost, and this lesson plan will help students identify those costs. And then opportunity cost in the following 2 lessons at the bottom right there. Play-Doh Economics has a great lesson on what it means if something is scarce, and how to make choices based on that scarcity. It goes through the terms, tells them to make a good that is valuable, apply the world scarcity to it, make choices. And then this teacher actually has them take a photo of their creation that they've made out of Play-Doh and tweet it. Not all schools are comfortable with that or have the technology for that. And then the one with the crayons and the candles, that's identifying the cost when choosing what to make out of paraffin. And so again, candles, crayons ties in with common everyday things that students understand and brings home the lesson about scarcity. There were so many resources for this particular standard that in the notes below the PowerPoint slide, there are 6 or 8 other lessons linked there as well. For the standard 4.12, using historical and/or local examples, explain how competition has influenced the productions of goods and services. At this point, I do want to apologize for the wonky typing at the top there. It was perfect when I typed it, and somehow in the uploading, it got goofed up. So it looks kind of wonky up there, but sorry about that. Okay, first we're defining it. What is competing, striving against a person to gain or win something? And then the running figure there. That's a lesson on what is competition, kind of teaching students to understand competition first of all, and then to see it in action. Here you go, or here you are. There's the food court. This is a bigger set of lessons, but if you go to the food court lesson about pizza competition, it will help students define and understand what different types of pizza establishments, how competition influences the goods and services they provide. Then the ice cream cone, another lesson plan about the benefits of competition and how competition can actually reduce price and benefit the consumer in that way. The Donut Chef is a cute book. It's a cute story about competing donut shops, and there's just a ton of ways to expand this. In fact, the next slide is entirely about Donut Chef and has all kinds of resources about how to extend this lesson into other areas, math, language arts, even an art lesson based on Donut Chef. Just an adorable book. The Warren Buffett Secret Millionaires Club, lots of very short videos there that are appropriate for fourth graders. And the ones that I've linked here are about competition and advertising. Advertising is a component of competition and helpful for students to understand that. There's also an interesting link to in the Secret Millionaires Club about reputation, and that's a more subtle and often overlooked component of competition, how the reputation you build can influence how people see you and whether or not they want to purchase the good or service that you're offering. In the pizza lesson, part of this lesson has students describing their own methods of competing, and so they get to actually apply what they've been learning. It's a good way to put it in practice and can be used as assessment after doing some of the other activities. The number 10 is the So What about competition. It's an article about 10 competitions that changed history, true life competitions between different companies and how things changed because of those competitions. So a historical tie-in there. The Monopoly is a historical article about some famous competitions in history and the effects of their outcomes. It also includes some information about monopolies and trusts and things like that, and so it extends the lesson beyond just competition into some other financial terms that students may be interested in. And then another activity that doesn't have a link or anything, but have students browse the yellow pages of your town or a phone book. Have students identify businesses that are competing with each other. Are there more than one shoe store in town? And how are they competing? And are there any goods or services that are missing? Are they available in a nearby town, or could a business in your town compete with a business in a nearby town, and what might that look like? So just ways to get students thinking about competition and what it means for them specifically in their own hometown setting. Here's the Donut Chef lesson and lots of links for other things that you can tie into that book. And then we'll go on to 4.13, compare and contrast different ways that the government interacts with the economy. Lessons for fourth graders about the government and the economy generally focus on taxes and the goods and services that those taxes provide. So students should learn that nothing is free. Sometimes they say, oh, we can get that free. Well, not really. The government provides it, and the government gets their money from taxes, which comes from hardworking individuals. So really, anybody who's working is paying for what you consider to be a free service from the government. In addition to public goods and services, the government also interacts with the economy through foreign trade relations, protection and regulation of natural resources, fair trade and businesses practices, civil laws, and freedom protections. That's an awful lot of information. It may be too much for your fourth graders, but if you know a little bit about those kinds of things, then you're better able to answer their questions as well if they come up. On the free ride picture in there, this lesson helps students identify goods and services provided by the government and evaluate the cost of those goods and services. The one that says tax is a lesson about the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency. Students will find out that their government pays for goods and services by taxing people and companies. In the economics lesson, the next one to the right, students create a bulletin board of a town to learn about taxes. And so it gives them some hands-on ways to interact with government taxes and their community or any community that they choose to design. In the bottom left, picture of City Hall there. Students take a virtual field trip through City Hall in this kid-friendly site. And the lesson, called Who Pays for City Hall, walks students through some of the services that the government provides. It would be interesting as well to compare that to your own City Hall in your community and find out specifically what the government provides, or what your tax dollars provide in your community. And then the taxation without representation, that's a historical example. Again, tying it back into history. Using the example of the Revolution, this lesson explores the role of government in taxing and why the colonists were so upset that they were being taxed without being represented in the government and what they did about that. In the notes section on this slide, there's also a number of things listed there, mostly just for the teachers' information, but it's what is the role of government in the economy? And I just included some things there just to help teachers understand a little more in depth what's involved with taxes, the economy, the government, and all of that. Okay, moving on to 4.14. Explain the reasons why the cost of goods and services rise and fall. This is a complex one. It was the most difficult one for me to find information and lesson plans related to it, and the most difficult one to understand. So cost is different than price. Cost refers to how much money it takes to produce a good or provide a service. Costs will go up if the raw material, labor, overhead, other things like that go up, but it also can go down if a fixed cost is distributed over a larger number of goods. And the next slide will go into that in a little more depth to help you kind of understand what's meant by variable costs and fixed costs and how that impacts the final cost of the item. Price refers to how much money a good or service can be sold for. And you need to know the cost in order to set the price, because if you set the price below your cost, you're going to lose money and your business is going to fail. So the little scale in the bottom left-hand corner there, that is a video about what demand is and teaches how external factors affect the supply and demand of a good or a service. The supply and demand is going to directly impact the cost of the goods and services and can cause goods and services to the cost of them to rise or fall. And so it's always helpful to understand the background, what's behind the cost, and that's where the scale comes in. If I Ran the Zoo, another literature tie-in with a good old classic from Dr. Seuss. This book will introduce some economics to and economic concepts to your students, not just goods and services or cost, but several other ones as well. And then the students will get a chance to use actual zoo criteria to help this unnamed zoo choose new animals. And so they're going to be involved in analyzing the costs of goods and services and figure out what's the most cost-effective, best animal to add to this zoo. It's a 2-day lesson, takes a while to work through it, but super valuable for the students. Using the gold rush as a backdrop, again, another historical event that ties into economics and finance. Students here will learn about supply and demand and why prices were so high on the gold fields, primarily because, of course, goods were very scarce, and so people could charge a high price for them. They'd earn a great profit for them as well. But students in this lesson learn to predict a price increase when presented with a problem involving shortages, which of course there was in the gold rush. And hopefully by tying into a specific historical event in these different lessons, they will spark some thoughts for you too. I don't know what you use or what you're teaching in your 4th grade classrooms for history and geography, but hopefully these will spark some ideas so that you can then take these lessons and apply them to whatever it is you're already teaching. Okay, the widget on the far right there, increasing productivity will generally reduce cost, and this is a lesson on productivity. And so let's go to the next slide. And we can look here. This slide is actually linked so that you can go through each piece of it separately. But basically, the idea is that if you have a box of raw materials, you can make one widget. One worker can produce 100 widgets, but costs $100. One building has enough space to produce 1,000 widgets, but costs $1,000. So if you filter that down, then if you want to only make one widget, it's going to cost you $1 in raw materials. It's going to cost you $100 for your worker, and it's going to cost you $1,000 for your building, which means your one widget cost $1,101, which is a very expensive widget. If you want to make 10 widgets, you're going to need 10 boxes of raw materials, which cost $10. You're still going to use the same one worker because he can easily produce 10 widgets, and you're going to use your same one building. So those are fixed costs. The box of raw materials is a variable cost. When you add that up, you get $1,110, but you have 10 widgets. Divide it by 10, and each widget only costs $111. So you can see by taking your fixed costs, spreading them over more goods, you can reduce the cost of the good itself. Same thing, extending it further. If you want to make 100 widgets, you need 100 boxes of raw materials for $100. The same one worker can produce all 100 widgets, so it's still $100, and the same building has enough space to produce all 100 widgets, so that's still $1,000. So now you have $1,200 total, but you made 100 widgets. Divide it out, and each widget is now only $12. So you can see there how spreading out variable costs affects the overall cost at the end, and that's a lesson on why the cost of goods and services can rise and fall. Variable and fixed expenses has a lot to do with that. Okay, moving on to standard 4.15, identify factors that can influence people's different spending and saving choices. Of course, there are probably as many different factors as there are people making choices, but there are some common ones, and so we're going to hit some of those. Things like wants and needs, a willingness to save and get it later after you've saved up for it, the influence of advertising on your choices, and the scarcity of supply. Another literature tie-in, The Boxcar Children, another classic. Students share several chapters of the book to learn about needs and wants and earning money. And students will complete a worksheet on needs and wants, create a spending plan based on those needs and wants, and determine ways that they can earn money. This lesson involves reading and includes a lot of math, making it a very good cross-curricular activity because it involves the math, the language arts, and the economics. The Play-Doh balls there, again, a scarcity lesson. We saw this same lesson in Standard 4.11, so it's linked here again. I'm not going to go into a description of it again. Advertising, again, some new lessons from Warren Buffett's Secret Millionaires Club. The advertising video in here goes into just a great description. It's only 2 minutes, but explains in a really good way how advertising affects what people want to buy or what they're aware of and choose to buy. Another advertising lesson up in the top right corner. Ads are used to inform and to influence decision making, and this lesson plan introduces students to the two basic functions of advertising and helps them recognize different advertising tricks that businesses use to lure in customers. A good follow-up to this would be the ad detective, which helps students identify new places where advertisers are promoting themselves and their product. In Believe It or Not, students will be able to tell the difference between factual claims and what they call puffery or opinions, and can help them be good consumers and make smart choices. And if you have some time to do some work with entrepreneurship, the marketing lesson is a really good one. Help students do some market research and learn how consumer behavior is influenced through non-price competition. Sometimes competition is not based on how expensive something is. Paste again is here because there's decision making that's involved. And then Investopedia teaches spending choices. Basically, it would be a good take-home lesson to send home so that parents can work with kids on how to make good choices with the family budget. And then Standard 4.16, this is our last one, determine the consequences of sharing personal information with others. How do you help students practice safe behavior online in the Red Riding Hood lesson? Students will learn the do's and don'ts through a fairy tale. Stop, think, and connect are the cybersecurity rules they learn there. In Jack and the Beanstalk, another fairy tale, they examine digital footprints and how risky some of their online decisions can be and what kind of digital trails they're leaving behind. This one also has a video included with it. And Goldilocks and the Three Passwords, the one on the far right, also is a video, and students learn how to create good passwords and what could happen if they don't create good passwords. At the bottom left, there's an infographic to teach what types of information are gathered by Facebook and Twitter. This is more of a teacher resource than for students, although students might find it interesting. And then Media Smarts. It's a Canadian site, but it has many resources for teaching students how to be safer online. And so even though it's Canadian, we included it. If you would like information sent to your email address every month, we would love to share our newsletter with you. Every month we share activities, lessons, and ideas that our grade age specific. We do a couple of things for elementary school, a couple for middle school, a couple for high school, and a couple that are just for teachers and to increase kind of a personal development for you. So all you have to do is send me an email, vicky.vermeer@dort.edu, and I'd be happy to sign you up for that. And that is the end of our presentation. We do have just a couple minutes left. If anybody has a question, I'd be happy to answer it at this time. Okay, it doesn't sound like there's any questions. I don't see any on the chat either. Oh, I take that back. Okay, Jesse, I can't see the attendee chat questions on mine, but if you could read me Julie's question, that'd be great.
Yep. She says, do you happen to know which Boxcar Children book we should read?
It's the first one in the series, the very first original one, and the lesson plan actually identifies specifically which chapters to read to tie in with the lesson. Of course, the whole book is great, but it'll identify specific chapters in the lesson plan that's linked in the PowerPoint. Good question. Okay, I want to thank everybody for visiting us today, for attending the webinar. A lot of information thrown at you really fast, so we would love to answer any questions that come up later as you're reviewing this information. Just to mention to you that we are doing this as a joint project between the Iowa Council on Economic Education and TS Institute, which is presented by Kyle Osborne, as well as the Dordt College Center for Economic Education, and that's where I call home. I'm the director of that center. And so we just invite you to contact either one of us if you have further questions. We'd love to help you out with anything related to economics and personal finance.
And then Julie asked if we'll be sending a copy of this PowerPoint later, and yes, this will be coming to you in an email.
Okay, great. Yes, you'll be getting not only the PowerPoint with all of the links in it, but you'll also be getting a recording of everything that I've been talking about today. So this entire recording, as well as the PowerPoint slides and all of the links attached to them, they are not copyrighted. They are not under any restrictions. And so please feel free to share them with the rest of your teaching team. We also have other webinars coming up, and we have webinars available for previous grades, younger grades that we've already done. So if you'd like access to any of those, please just reach out to us and we'd be happy to send those to you as well. We are now at the end of our time, so unless there are further questions, I will sign off and hope to hear from each of you later. Don't forget to fill out the short questionnaire at the end once we log off, because you will be eligible then to win a small gift certificate. And so we'd love to have you fill out, it's just a few questions. It only takes a couple minutes, and you could win a $20 gift certificate. Thanks so much, everyone. I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.